Hi there. Welcome to Art of Sacred Embodiment, and I am Lotus Lindley. So, if you are seeing this on YouTube, welcome to my YouTube channel. I have not posted anything for quite some time, so I wanted to return and reconnect with particularly this video today and this topic today on the attachment or addiction to suffering and shadow work. So I just want to do this in a short snippet overview about the changes that we are in at this time as the frequencies and the energies and our consciousness is raising, expanding, however you want to term it. We are now really primed to work through more levels of density that we carry in our bodies and our consciousness, that we carry wrapped around our heart, from past wounding, from shames, from guilts, and from programs of fear and scarcity and lack. Lack also not only being material lack, but not being enough, being in a comparison or competitive mindset that is governed by the distorted ego consciousness that is evolving as we evolve. So, but what I want to talk about first is shadow work. So, in the past, shadow work has really been a tool that's been necessary, and a lot of people feel like it's not as necessary anymore because of the heightened frequencies. And I do think that that is true to a point. My perception is that if you've already learned how to really work with the energetics of thought forms and emotions and how these lodge in our body, how they create behaviors, and if you've identified some of your core, those core roots of your main wounding, then I think that we can move through these processes really pretty rapidly. But there's still a vast amount of us who don't really have this concept and have not worked with energy enough to really transmute all of this in an efficient way. And so what I want to do is I want to bridge both of this, because while for many of us the shadow work may not be necessary and is an outmoded technique, tool, or concept, there's still a great many that I feel can benefit from understanding a little bit of what that is. So briefly, as I mentioned, our shadow tends to be that part of us that we do not look at. We don't want to look at. We put lock away maybe in a closet, deep in the recesses of our own memories, in our body, in our mind. And they usually carry fear, shame, guilt, and grief that is unresolved because we haven't had the know-how or the tools or the support in order to resolve that, integrate it, heal it, and then move forward in a clearer path and consciousness in our life. So when we're looking at ascension, we're really, part of what we're looking at is frequencies, right? The energy, the vibration, and the qualities of energies. So the shadows tend to hold denser, heavier energy. If you think about times maybe when you've been grieving, when you've been depressed, when you've been angry, how that feels in your body tends to be uncomfortable, not very pleasant, contracted, constricted, heavy and thick, right? And then the frequencies that carry freedom, love, joy tend to be a little bit more effervescent feeling almost. So what we're wanting to do is create more space in our consciousness, our heart, and our body, our being, our whole being, subtle bodies and physical body, to hold more light and to hold more qualities of light that are peace, joy, freedom, creativity, happiness, right? Inspiration. But it's very hard for the dense shadow to, if it is still lodged within our being, and I'm using that as a whole, as a term for our whole being, right? Mind, body, soul, emotions, and spirit. So what we're wanting to do is we want to heal that shadow element. We want to recognize it, acknowledge it, and help it to move through. And oftentimes this is integral with the inner child work, really coming to a place where we can support and love and hold our little boy or little girl, which is where many of the wounds first started, at least in this incarnation. So as we do this, and as the frequencies continue to rise in our own body and anchor more deeply, creating a very new reality, then, thank you, buddy. Bubba's giving me kisses. We can then learn how to allow the lighter frequencies, the higher frequencies, to help us continuously transmute any darkness and heaviness into more levity and light. So that's the brief part of shadow work, and it can now be done so much quicker, I believe, even for those who this is very brand new to. It's just the acknowledgement and the tools and support. And this is what I help some people work through. We don't spend a lot of time on it because the other piece of this is as we move forward in our now moment period, we will face whatever needs to come up to the surface. And so as we continue to bloom really into what we're here to experience and to bring forth that is of the higher frequencies, we will naturally bring forth what needs to be transmuted. And at the same time, sometimes we need to give it a little bit more laser focus in the beginning processes of really moving into new leaps and bounds. So let's look at our addiction to suffering and our attachment to suffering and to pain. We have lived in a world, and particularly in the West, a society where we have been programmed to veer unconsciously towards pain and suffering. The easiest way to recognize this is to look at our entertainment, to look at the plethora of video games that are violent, to listen to a lot of music, lyrics that, that hurt so good, right? In many different ways that, oh, if it hurts this bad, it must be right. It must be love. So we have an addiction and an attachment that moves all the way through our cellular structure, right? That predisposes us to move towards that reward. And that reward, I'm using that term, lightly. That reward gives us maybe not the feeling that we truly want, but supports a craving that is already set up in our system that supports specific stories, i.e., shadow elements of our beliefs and thought forms and emotional patterns where suffering is the predominant reality, that we believe it's necessary, that we somehow believe that that story is true. And even if we start to move away from it intellectually, many of these programs are hardwired all the way through our nervous system, our brain, our entire body. So how do we begin to move through this? The first thing that we really need to do is be able to identify that we are indeed attached or addicted to our pain or suffering. Awareness, 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 right? That's always the first key to bring us into a new place of empowerment. So let's just do a very simple example. Think of anything in your life that you may get some level of satisfaction from, and yet when you partake in it, you don't feel very good about yourself. Maybe you don't feel good physically. Maybe you don't feel good emotionally or mentally. Maybe it represents some sort of regression to something that you're trying to change. I'll give a personal example that I feel is mostly now broken, but my relationship with caffeine. Okay, so coffee, primarily tea, green tea, coffee and green tea I love. To the best of my knowledge thus far, and I feel like I have a fairly good handle on this, but there's always more that we get to be revealed, so I don't really do absolutes with anything. The stimulation of caffeine is not what serves me. Although there have been times where I will use it consciously for that reason. But as a whole, I tend to be very drawn to green teas because I like the bitterness, I like the astringency, I like the dryness of the flavor. I don't necessarily like the way that it makes me feel. Coffee is the same way. I like that kind of robust flavor, right? 1 cup is really good every once in a while. Beyond that, I start teetering into a choice of suffering. So if I drink either one of those beverages, maybe once a week, it feels nourishing and supportive to my system. Or if I use it consciously because I really want to focus a little bit more, or I need to get some things done, and maybe I've been a little bit short of sleep. I don't medicate my lack of sleep. I rest. I choose to rest. I've learned that over the years. And I know that we function in a society where we want to medicate a lot of these things and get the quick fix because we have to function in the 3D paradigm. So, but I've created a life where I can unplug from that paradigm, in a good amount, in a good ratio. So when I use it to focus, I usually use mate for a very specific reason because that feels like a really good focusing medicine for my alertness. Now, when I drink coffee or green tea or mate, say I have visitors, right? Like my mother was just here last week, and I'm drinking it daily. Even if it's just 1 or 2 cups, I don't like the way that I feel. And I know this going in. I know it's going to dry me out. I know it's going to dehydrate me. I know it's going to make me tired. I know it's not going to feel good on my stomach. I know these things. And yet, when I choose them, I am choosing suffering. I am choosing some level of discomfort for myself, knowingly. And it doesn't really matter the reasons or excuses. It doesn't matter that it's because my mom was here visiting. The point that I'm wanting to make is, why do we choose that which will create a suffering within us? And the easy answer is that this is a way that we have been conditioned. We have been programmed, and that's a whole other talk, why we have been programmed to choose suffering and to choose pain. But suffice it to say that that we all suffer from this in some way, shape, or form. So what is a really good way to begin to recognize this pattern? So I loved this example that Matt Kahn gave in a talk I listened to him years ago, and he was referring to somebody that he was working with that smoked and was trying to quit smoking. And the question or the statement that he gave to that person, I also began to implement in my own life. And that statement is that no matter what I'm doing, I begin to say to myself, this is the most loving thing I can do for myself at this moment. It was so powerful for me. And as I began to implement that, the level of ahas that came to the surface kind of blew me away. Because when I first heard and started listening, to this whole concept of an addiction to pain and suffering, I very quickly resisted it. I wouldn't say I didn't buy into it. I don't think I really wanted to acknowledge it or look at it because, I think like many of us, to take responsibility for the fact that we are creating our own pain and suffering opens up a whole new door of responsibility and of knowing and of our power to choose. So what I want to leave you with is that statement, and to begin to open up your awareness to where this comes into play. And you may already be aware of this, and this may be new to you, or you might be somewhere in the middle. But to really empower yourself with this knowing, because we're truly in a phase, a stage of grand empowerment by our ability to choose, and choosing moment to moment the reality that we are creating in this moment, and the reality that we are creating by streaming together each now moment. This is all a part of the embodiment process. This is all about anchoring these deeper knowings deeply into our body and transforming even down to the cellular structure, so that we're no longer radiating or amplifying information from our cells that will continue to attract that same vibration. We want to increase the amplification in our entire being with more light, with more self-love, with more health and vitality, clarity, empowerment, and the knowing, the embodied knowing of our power to choose, to continually up-level and upgrade our entire being. So I think that's all I want to say with that. I could go on, but I really want to keep these short and concise because I know people are busy. So if you feel called to explore any of this a little bit deeper, then you may contact me at lotuslindley.net. And the email address is there, or find me on Facebook under Lotus Lindley and private message me. Friend me, or just follow, or just message me, whichever you like. I also have a business page, and that is Lotus Lindley, Art of Sacred Embodiment. So that is all. And as we move from the shadow into light with ease and grace, may you find the rest of your day or night, or whenever you are listening to this, filled with a little bit more encouragement and enthusiasm to release any attachments that you have to suffering. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.